Welcome in for those of you who are just joining us. We have a prompt on the screen, and I would encourage you to drop an answer into the chat box and get to know everybody in the room, and so we can get a little bit of background information about your board service. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for popping in the chat, Ashley. Glad you're here. Glad you can make it.
I'm happy to be here. I'm answering the second question in the chat before everyone else comes on.
Perfect. Well, we will get started. I would encourage you all to continue to put your answers to that prompt and question in the chat box. Good evening. My name is Jono Warren, and I'm the Learning Experience Coordinator at Cause Strategy Partners. Thanks so much for being here today and for your interest in nonprofit board service. We're really excited for today's session, but before we get into the content, I've got just a couple of announcements. We highly encourage all participants to leave their cameras on and their mics muted, but just stay close to your computer and your screen and especially your unmute button, because we've got an interactive training session for you today and we do want to hear from you. Throughout as well, we will be using the chat box, so feel free to continue responding to that just even now. As we get into the content, if you have any questions, just know that we will be reserving some time at the end for Q&A, but also feel free to use the raise hand function in Zoom at the bottom of your screen in the reactions, and we'll do our best to get to you even within the session if you've got a question about content. Finally, we are recording this. You probably heard the little announcement or got the notification. We're just going to be, well, Lauren rather, will be distributing this to you all for future reference, just because there's so much content that we're going to be covering in here. Thank you once again for being here and being engaged and digging into some amazing content. I'd love to pass it over to you, Lauren, for a brief introduction.
Hey everyone, so I'm so excited for you all to be here. This is our first session of the Board Seat Certification Program, which has been years in the making. Courtney Scruggs, who will be speaking to us later tonight, actually developed the program. I know she is equally as thrilled, if not even a little bit more, that this is finally happening and we're finally kicking it off. So really excited for you all to be here. So when she was looking at all of the different options and how to bring this program to life, she sourced so many different third parties, and Cause Strategy Partners was the perfect partner for us. They have an extensive staff, as you'll see, and trainers that will be leading us through a variety of different curriculums, both from the profit and nonprofit sector. And they transformed leadership in the social good sector by partnering with top companies to train and support high impact professionals for board seat positions. So it's exactly what we need for the Junior League of Boston and the greater Boston community. In addition to their expertise, Courtney customized the training for what she saw the greater Boston, greater Boston community needing in terms of training for a board seat role. So tonight's really the initial kickoff on what it is to be a great leader in the boardroom, and we're going to have two speakers. Courtney is one of them, and the other is Jamie Gardner. So I'm going to just quickly read through their very impressive bios to give you all just some background of what their experience is and what you all can learn from them today. So Courtney Scruggs is currently principal and founder of CS Solutions and Strategies LLC, a consulting firm that provides business and legal strategy and problem solving for small women-led businesses. Courtney is also Life Sciences Council with Axiom Global, where she provides commercial contracting, negotiation support, and business partnership to Fortune 500 life sciences and pharmaceutical companies in North America. Courtney is also treasurer and advocacy committee chair of the National Bar Association Women's Lawyers Division, and she has also served on numerous nonprofit boards, including Capital Network, Court Appointed Special Advocates for Children, and Student National Medical Association. So we're really excited to have her here tonight to share her experience and advice on becoming the best leader in the boardroom. Jamie Gardner is a board lead trainer and cost strategy partners at Cost Strategy Partners. She's a social entrepreneur with deep-rooted experience in bringing private and public sector leaders together to bridge today's most complex systemic societal divides. She leads a consultancy practice that turns big ideas into action and ultimately real results. She also serves as a board member for Fuse Corp, formerly board president, and Team for Tech, and is advisor to several local and nonprofits, including San Francisco CASA. So just thrilled again to have both of these women here tonight. And to kick off this session, I'm going to pass it over to Jamie.
Thank you, Lauren. I really appreciate that. Jonah, if you want to go ahead and go on to the next slide, I'll just take a moment to reiterate what you said about board lead and why we're here. First of all, I want to say my first entree into nonprofit work was through Junior League when I first moved to Denver many moons ago. So it's really fun to see this come around full circle and be able to give back all the experience that it helped me gain. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I love this program with Cost Strategy Partners. So we work around the globe now. We actually recently expanded internationally. And as the slide says, we really focus on working with business executives in order to bring their expertise into the nonprofit sector and train them how to ensure that they're high performing nonprofit board leaders. So I get the privilege of doing it both from a placement, how do we work with executives directly to put them on boards that they'll deeply care about, as well as training. So what is it that they need to know in order to be great board members? So the training we're going to offer you today, I have way too much content and too little time. We're going to try to make it as interactive as possible. And what was already shared is that we'll go through all the information as quickly as possible, and so that we can really focus on lived experience as well, and then offer up some Q&A. But please don't hesitate if you have questions. I'm focusing on what I think is most important, but there might spark an idea or a question for you. So please feel free to pop it in the chat box. And Jonah's going to help me keep track of that. And he'll interrupt at any point in time in order to share his experience or anything that important that I might have missed that might be useful. So thank you for your partnership. So with that, let's dive in. What I'd love to know is, for those of you who have served on the board, I love seeing the one breadth of experience, some who are brand new to it. So thank you for going through this process, knowing that you're going into it to be the best board member you can possibly be. And those of you with experience, you'll have a lot to add to the conversation based on your experience and what you've seen live. So that's wonderful. What I'd like you to do, for those of you who have been on a board before, is think about what was or who was the most effective board member that you had worked with, and what is it that made them so effective? What is it that you saw that said, oh, that is making a difference, that stuck in your mind that you might be able to share with everyone else in the chat box? Or if you want to come off mute, you can say it out loud too, because I would love to hear your voices. Does that mean none of you saw anyone you were really impressed by? Time boxing people. Tori, what do you mean by that?
So this was actually when I sat in on a Junior League board meeting, and I thought it was just really effective for the leader of the conversation to keep people accountable to the time that was allotted for them to speak, to ensure that all of the agenda items were covered. Since boards, typically don't meet too frequently, it's really important that all of the agenda items get covered. And I just hadn't seen it quite so strict that way, but I really appreciated it and saw how it was impactful.
Great, thanks for sharing. We spend a lot of time in meetings, and so to keep the meetings effective and productive, that's a really valuable tool. So thanks for sharing. thinking ahead to the next step. There's a nice call out to Tori. That's great. And Tracy. All right, well, let's dive into it then. Let me share with you what we think are the most effective qualities and characteristics that board members exhibit. So we'll look at some of the behaviors and actions that set board members apart, that make the board experience more impactful, not only for themselves, but for everyone on the board. So if we understand the markers of a highly effective board members, then we're all empowered to deliver on them and ensure lasting impact. So we came up with 7 markers. We did that through first spending time looking at what is our own experience. What is it that we've seen both by being board members as well as working alongside effective board members. Then we pulled out the qualities, characteristics, behavior, and actions of those who we saw were effective in that role. And what is it that they did differently from everyone else on the board? And then we developed a list in order to say, what is it that really matters? And we leveraged the BoardSource National Index of Nonprofit Board Service in order to say, what is it that they saw? So we have researched this far and wide. It's really what we spend all of our time doing. And that's how we came up with this list. So to start off with, kicking it off, it really comes down to mission passion. And I say this all the time, especially when you're looking for new board members. What matters most is that the board members cares deeply about the organization's mission, because sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels like work. And so what matters is that there's something behind you that says, I care about us achieving our results because I want this organization to be successful. So that's the first thing we focus on. And when we tell someone looking for a new board member, make sure they care about the mission, number one. And there's actually data to back this up as well. So for example, we interviewed, or I didn't, but an organization interviewed great boards. And what they saw is that both board chairs and CEOs report over 80 and 90% that the board has a very positive or somewhat positive impact on the overall effectiveness of the organization. So that's great news. We want you to know that the organization leaders are truly relying on you to make a difference in the organization and what it achieves. So you as an individual board member truly matter. The work that you do can raise the boats for everyone else on the board. In fact, that's oftentimes why boards are looking for new members, is to bring in fresh ideas, fresh energy, and create new momentum for the organization. So you as an individual caring about that organization can have a tremendous impact. So that's number one. Number two is looking at, you care about the results and you're going to do everything you can to help the organization achieve them. So I'll never understand this, why people would raise their hand and say, I'm going to be on a board, but then they don't actually engage. I actually worked with a board chair once who he would sit in the meetings. He was brilliant and he was wonderful to work with, but in his board meetings, he would sit there looking through Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. And it was so demoralizing for everyone else around us, because we're like, well, if the board chair isn't engaged, why should I be engaged? Or if what I'm saying, it doesn't even matter if he's not even listening. So it's critical that when you sign up to be on a board, that you're willing to go all in on it. So what we know is that effective board members demonstrate full engagement. So what does that look like? We actually have come up with a list of criteria that we recommend anyone we work with commits to what we call the board leader way. So what does that look like? 1 is engaging robustly in board meetings. 2 is serving on at least 1 board committee. Now, all nonprofits have different board sizes, so smaller boards don't necessarily have committees. In fact, I often recommend working groups, but making sure that you're raising your hand to say you'll go above and beyond just showing up at the meeting. Maintaining a near perfect meeting attendance record. There's nothing worse than a nonprofit CEO calling around trying to get board members to attend so that they can have quorum. Make sure you attend as often as you can. Of course, life gets in the way. You can't be there 100% of the time, but your goal should be to try to make that happen. Next, contributing a meaningful gift. So most boards say, what matters to you? If you're younger, you don't have a big job with a big salary, just making a $50 gift makes a difference. If you have a big job and you have access to a lot more resources, obviously that's really welcome. But what matters most is that 100% of the board gives. So even when a nonprofit is applying for grants, one way that foundations or governments look to see how effective this organization is to see if they have 100% giving from their board. So whether it's $1, $50, $5,000, $50,000, what's critical is that you commit to giving a gift that matters to you. Next is participating actively in fundraising efforts. Now, some people prickle when they see this. I see typically about a third of board members love giving, a third of the members say, oh, I'll do what I need to do, and a third say, I want nothing to do with fundraising, don't even ask me. But actually, everyone has a role you can play, even if it's as simple as asking your mom to attend a session, right? Or your brother to write a check. So wherever and however it feels comfortable for you, just be willing to know that you play an important role as an advocate in fundraising for the organization. Aside from fundraising, being able to leverage your expertise, your skills, your network is a critical component of why you're on that board. And we'll talk more about that. And then using your power to advance equity and inclusion. We want everyone to always keep that at the top of their mind. Is your organization accurately representing the people you're serving? The board should look similar to those people. The staff should look similar to those people so that you're bringing lived experience to create equity and inclusion with the people you're serving. And then completing each elected term. So every organization should say, is it a 1-year term, a 2-year term, a 3-year term? But just know when you're going into it and you're signing up to it, that mentally you're committing to that. Now, obviously, again, life gets in the way, but as long as you know you're making a commitment to that, then you'll try to do the best that you can. So we ask that anyone who steps on a board that they're committing to these standards, which is why we call it the board leader way. Following that, what we find is that board members who aren't willing to do these things, we actually find 34% of executive directors say that has a negative impact on the organization. So like I said, if you're not showing up, if you're not asking smart questions, if you're not willing to give, then you're taking up an important seat that someone is willing to play that role. So we want you to know that it really does matter that you step up to fully engage. And in order to be able to do that, we recommend 3 steps to take. One is training. So the nonprofit should provide onboarding for you. They should provide for you, what is it we expect of you to do? They should have a job description per se of what your role should look like. You should have many conversations before accepting the board and as you get on board so that you know what's expected. And then second is preparation. So before every meeting, make sure you set aside at least an hour or 2 of time to read through the meeting notes so that you're going into it with that information already in mind instead of having to learn it on the fly. That will give you the ability to ask smart questions or helpful questions. And then 3 is the performance. It's what you do when you're in the room as well as when you're outside of the room to represent that organization. So you can look at it as those 3 steps that it takes for you to step up and be a community leader in a way that makes it worthwhile and high impact. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, we're going into once you're willing to step up and engage and you know how to engage, really one of the most important roles that a board member plays is all around strategic with strategy. So being a strategic thinker. There's actually 4 core areas of responsibility for a board member in addition to building and managing the strategy of the organization, providing fiduciary oversight, driving resources to the organization, and leveraging your professional skills, but we'll get to those later. Right now, I really want to focus on the importance of your strategic thinking. Because believe it or not, a lot of people don't understand that, but owning the organization's strategy is actually the responsibility of the board. That's because CEOs may come and go over the years. Staff is going to change, and they're also very deep in the weeds, whereas the board has the ability to have the view of the forest. And so it's actually their responsibility to build the strategy, revise the strategy, and monitor the implementation of the strategy. So it's critical that you think of it from that mindset. At the same time, I want to encourage you, you want to stay high level. You don't want to get too much in the weeds, but you want to keep that forest perspective when you're looking at the strategy. What you see here on the slides is it's broken down into those four areas in regards to strategy. So the first one is that you've adopted a good strategy. The second is that the board actually talks about that strategy. The third is that they monitor the performance. And the fourth is that they actually focus on strategy and policy versus operational decisions. So you'll see here the reports or the research shows that most organizations, most boards are pretty good at building and developing the strategy and thinking about it. Then we start losing emphasis as we're monitoring performance, kind of stray away from what was our North Star and what was the pathway that we said we were going to get there. And we do an even worse job of thinking at that bigger picture level. Are we doing the right things on a day-to-day basis? So something to keep in mind is to make sure that you're doing this on an ongoing basis. Excuse me. So I want to encourage you that as you're going into your boards, if you haven't already seen the strategic plan, ask for it. That's something really good to do when you're first interviewing for the organization. Once you have it, you want to make sure that you continue to stay on top of it, that you ask important questions when you're in the board meetings that relate back to that strategic plan. You want to make sure that no matter what you're doing, you're always being guided by that mission, the vision, values, and the strategy of where it is and how your organization is going to get there. So keeping that in mind is step 3 on being an effective board member. Step 4, how many of you have heard of the Jim Collins Good to Great? Some of us have read it in business. Yeah. So they made it for business and then they adapted it for nonprofits, and it goes the same way. So really what they want to say, or what they found, is that enduring great organizations actually have this interesting duality. On one hand, they had a set of timeless core values and purpose. They know what their North Star is and they're going to do everything they can to get there, and that never really changes. Yet on the other hand, they have a relentless drive for progress. So that's improvement, constant improvement, and constant learning and innovation, and renewing the organization, how it's going about achieving that mission. So you want to hold both of those be true. If you know and truly understand the mission, vision, and values of the organizations, those likely won't change over a long period of time. But how you get there, you want to be constantly in a position of asking, is what we're doing working? Are we actually meeting our desired results? And if not, what's not working and how do we change it? So trying to keep those two in balance, preserving the core while also stimulating progress, is a key to success. And that's where you as a board member have a really added value, because you're holding on to what's constant every day, which is that mission, vision, values. But you're seeing what's happening outside the organization, what might be happening in the market or in policy or in your community, so you can bring that experience to the table. So for holding those both true is really valuable. All right, next up, number 5. What makes a really good strategic partner is asking great questions. So like I said before, one of the values you bring is coming in with the forest perspective. You're seeing the broader picture, but you're working in partnership with people who are living the day-to-day of that organization. So we want to ask you to have the humility of knowing you might not have the answers. You might have great ideas and you might have great suggestions, but you probably don't know the answers. So the way to get there is to ask really important questions. So you're not the executive function. You're not making the day-to-day decisions. You're more of a legislative function. So you're wanting to look at the big picture and ask questions about how what the organization is doing is helping achieve that big picture. Any questions about that? I'm going pretty fast, so I should slow down and see if there are questions. All right, well, let's practice this then as though we were on a board right now. I'm going to give you a case study, and I'm going to give you a series of statements and find out from you what are the types of questions you would ask to make sure the organization is making the right decision. So in this case, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston you're on the board, and the Bellagio Hotel in Vegas has asked the museum to lend them some Monet paintings. So the Museum of Fine Arts is nonprofit, Bellagio Hotel and its gallery is for profit, and the board needs to vote on whether or not this is a partnership you want to engage in. What would you want to know? Whether you say, yes, we're going to do this, or no. What kind of questions would you ask?
I would want to know if the Bellagio was making some kind of, since this is a nonprofit, some sort of like financial contribution or donation, and like at what level to the museum.
Great, nice. So how do they make sure it's going to benefit the organization? I love it, great. All right, there's also maybe a question about whether or not are we blurring the line between art and commerce. If the mission of the museum is to spread art, do we need to be raising money from this kind of organization? All right.
I think even a background is, what is their purpose? And does their purpose for having the paintings tie into what your vision is?
Great, great. All right, let me give you another question or statement to look at. The Bellagio said they're going to guarantee an average of 1,000 visitors a day to the gallery, which is a ticket sales of $6 million annually, and a budget, that percentage will then go to the Boston Museum. So back to your point of what does the museum get out of it? So in this case, they'll get guaranteed contribution of at least $1 million annually from the show. How does that change your mind? Are you yes or are you no? What is it you'd want to know? Ooh, branding.
Well, at the very worst thing to say is, what is the overall financial position? If the museum is actually struggling and has major cash shortages, they might be willing to look at things that don't quite match their vision. If they don't, then that's going to also change how they approach this. And I guess it goes back to the same thing, is if the Bellagio is going to be using this for something that doesn't go at all with the vision or promoting the art, then do you want to be involved at all? So those kind of tie in together.
That's great. Yeah, think about it. It's Boston and Vegas. Is there a direct correlation there?
I've also seen with some charity work, because of COVID, dare I say, that charities are tackling fundraising in ways they wouldn't have normally because they're so desperate to get the funding. And that might affect the museum also.
Right. And would it surprise you to learn that 30% of the visitors to the Bellagio gallery have never been to an art gallery before? So perhaps in some ways, this might be a way to create more advocates for the museum in the future. Another fun fact, or actually, let's go ahead and look at more before I give you more fun facts. Johnny, you want to go? Thank you. The Boston Museum raised an annual revenue of $144 million in 2016. So again, talking about the different sizes of the organization. In 2015, the museum finished the fiscal year of $30 million in the red. So they're actually in some big needs for some cash contributions. Their net assets total $975 million. Does that change your opinion whether or not they should lend the art?
It might, but if this is a major draw for the museum here, is that going to cause them to be further in the red? And it's well and good to say they may make money off of it, but how many people in Vegas are going to then come back to Boston to go to the museum? So that's an important thing to consider. And whether or not, like I say, the disappearance of the painting, if it's going to reduce their net revenue.
Great points. All right, so now what if I told you that all of the works that are going to be on loan are not on display currently at the Boston Museum? Actually, they sit in storage and not seen by the patrons. Grace is asking, would the Bellagio be open to negotiating the guaranteed amount to a higher amount? Will not have the paintings in Boston reduce ticket sales here. Great. So one more I want to throw out at you. Shauna, can you move me forward, please? Thank you. Oh, Vegas does not have a major art museum of its own. And let's go ahead and go to the next one. So it's uncommon, while it is uncommon for these, this is actually true. While it's uncommon for museums to lend their works of art to other museums at cost, experts indicate that instances of museums lending works to for-profit making galleries is exceedingly rare. And many experts worry if the museums lend their work out, would actually continue to break down the cost of museums who are doing it for free. So these experts that we've spoken to actually feel strongly that the intellectual merit and educational benefits must be the primary consideration for loan arts to other institutions. So do we feel that going to the Bellagio Hotel is going to expand our outreach in education?
Well, at the risk of being the difficult one, I always tend to wear the financial hat. How long have they been running the red in the red? And I do support the education and the art is extremely important. But if it's to the point that the museum is not going to survive, then they need to look at other ways to access those funds. And I don't know if we have that information. So that would be one of the questions is what is the stream of revenue? What has it been looking like? Has this changed because of COVID? Or is this something ongoing that the museum has not been tackling?
Great. And then Allie shared that, are there any legal implications? A lot of art is loaned to museums from private collections, and they may not have the authority to lend all the paintings to the Bellagio. Great. These are all great points. And what I want to reiterate is there's no right answer, right? There's no encyclopedia that says, here's the way you approach it. So these kinds of conversations, the questions you're all raising, the ideas that you're raising, and then coming together as a board and agreeing on how you're going to approach it, that's the only answer, is that you all come to a place where you feel like you have fully vetted the opportunity, you've had the uncomfortable or perhaps difficult conversation where you may disagree, and you find your way through it to the answer. That's the critical point. That's how you be a great board member, is by making sure you're asking those kinds of questions, engaging in those conversations, and then coming up with a cohesive strategy that would make for a great board conversation. Okay, well, that takes us to number 6 then. Going back to fundraising and other ways that you contribute to the organization. One of your core responsibility is driving resources to the organization. So some of you might have heard before, time, treasure, talent, right? Time is, are you showing up? Treasure, are you giving your own personal gift, and are you asking from others to contribute? And talent is, what is your personal expertise? What is it that you know inside and out that you can offer to the organization for free? That's your talent. Or it could be the people that you work with. All of you have access to incredible networks. Who do you know that might be able to help answer questions to the organization, provide time, treasure, or talent? Okay, so that's an important role of yours as a board member. And what's really important to the role is actually one of 3 governing rules for an organization is you cannot let your organization run out of money. No money, no mission. So while sometimes fundraising is uncomfortable, it is critical that you're monitoring the financial situation of the organization and doing the best that you can to help generate awareness and resources to ensure its financial solvability. All right, any questions as we dive into the final one? All right, so we're going back again then to the partnership, and how is it that you get to cohesive decisions? It's all about your relationships with the people on the board with you. So number 7, the important characteristic of being an effective board member is making sure you have really strong partnerships. That's with both the chief executive officer or the executive director of the organization. It's with the board chair, and it's with your fellow board members. So if you're really doing your job, and we've seen it with COVID, you might get into sticky conversations and sticky situations throughout your board tenure. And so knowing that you're all in it because you care deeply about the mission, and that you're all in it to do what's best for the organization, then you should be able to build the trust necessary in order to make some of these difficult conversations. And the only way you do that is by developing these solid relationships. So I encourage every board member to meet both with your board chair You want to do it when you're deciding about joining the board. So when you have the opportunity to interview with the executive director, if it's not offered, also ask to meet with the board chair. And then you might want to ask to meet with a couple board members as well. Or another way when you're vetting an organization you want to work with is look on their board list and then reach out to those board members. If they care deeply about the organization, they're going to want to spend that time with you. They're vetting you as well to make sure that you're a good fit. So you want to do it before you even join the board. And then even more important is after the board, you're on it, create time to get to know each other. Don't treat it like it's just another meeting you have to show up for. Create opportunities to get to know each other. So let me give you an example of what this can look like. Let's go ahead and imagine you're downtown Boston and you're getting on the bus and you're going down to the museum, let's say. You're with a whole bunch of strangers and you get on the bus. What does it feel like? What is the attitude and energy in the air? What is your relationship with the people on the bus? Go ahead and put it in the chat box just to do a speed download of brainstorming. What does it feel like? Cooperation for a safe ride, stressful, especially right now with COVID. Do we have our masks on? Right. Do I know where I'm going? Annoying. Yes, it can be. Do you want to, are we getting there fast enough? Are people loud? I can't stand the way they're talking. Great points. Not exactly collaborative. But let's see another example. What if we're actually, imagine on the baseball team and we're going to a game together? So we're a team of people that have played together. Maybe we're new to playing together, but we're all on the same team. What does that feel like when you're all on the bus together going to your game? Shared goals, camaraderie, teamwork, fun and chatting, team building, unity. Exactly. You're all on the same team. You have a shared vision, a shared end goal. It's upbeat and energetic. Exactly. So what's the difference between these two environments? One is a group of strangers, one has formed into a team, and that's the exact same thing you'll feel on the effective board. When you go into a room at a board meeting, people are talking nasty about each other or behind each other's backs. No one's participating in the room. You can feel that. It's so negative. And you can usually see that in the way the organization is performing as well. But it feels totally different when you're going into a board meeting and all of you are on the same team. There's the enthusiasm and excitement. There's a respect for each other. There's an understanding of everyone's strengths, the roles everyone plays as individuals, but how they also operate together. There's a shared strategy for winning. And there's a commitment to put the team first before one's own individual goals. So highly effective boards are teams, not a group of strangers. Hopefully you can get the feeling of that. I always love that exercise. And then this gentleman, Jeffrey Sonfeld, who he is a professor at Yale School of Management. And so he wrote a book, and what he actually did was interview a whole bunch of corporate boards. And he looked at both those who were governing effective companies, as well as those who were governing underperforming companies. And what he found is that it's not actually the typical measures of success that show whether or not the board is effective. So typically you measure regular meeting attendance, who's showing up, equity involvement with the company, who has equity. This is more in a for-profit environment, but it translates the same. What are the board members' skills? What's the board size and committee structure? What are the age and experience of the board members? Those are very easy things to quantify, but in the end, they actually don't have much to do with board effectiveness. He calls it the robust, effective social systems is what marks a truly effective board. And what creates that is a virtuous cycle of respect, trust, and candor. Do you show respect to each other? Do you trust one another? And are you willing to have the difficult conversations? That's what makes a truly effective board. And on a more fun side of it, what we find also is that the boards are most effective are ones that spend time socializing together. So like I said, and especially in this current environment when everything's online, we're going to back-to-back meetings. Some of you are probably jumping off of here. You've just had dinner with your kids. You're ready to put them to bed, right? So it's like we have so much on our plate. We have to schedule the downtime with one another. So we really encourage, if you're meeting in person, can you schedule a dinner or a lunch? Can you schedule time with the people in the organization? Can you have 15 minutes on the call or during the meeting to say, hey, tell me what's going on? How are you? Do you create time to say, what's a mission hit? Why are you here? Why do you care about each other? Get to know one another, build that foundation of trust, and that often comes through making time to socialize with one another. All right, so that is my speed run through of the 7 effective markers of a great board member and an effective board. So 1, to recap, you're consumed with the mission passion. You're consumed with achieving strong results. 2, you understand your role and are fully engaged. 3, you're showing up as a strategic thinker and always leveraging that strategic plan. 4, you're preserving the core, the mission, vision, and values, but always creating opportunities for progress and innovation. 5, you're curious and asking great questions. 6, you're driving resources to the organization. And 7, you create constructive partnerships. I guarantee you, if you're doing your best to provide this type of input, and if you're encouraging your board members to do the same, then you're going to have a really fun, impactful experience. So hopefully that's useful. Before we jump into Q&A, I would love to have the real experience or live experience. And here's where we'll bring Courtney on to tell us more. You've already heard a lot about her background, that she's this brilliant lawyer with both in-house and agency experience, specializing in healthcare and pharmaceutical industry, but also with complex commercial contracting. And she's also an incredible philanthropist from what I understand. So I'm really excited to hear your experience. Courtney, do you want to come on and let us know a little bit more about the board that you're on and why you've chosen to be a part of this organization?
Sure. So good evening, everybody. As Lauren said, it's almost surreal to sit here now and to see everyone's face in the gallery in this session, because literally when I joined the Junior League of Boston, it was in part to bring this event, this certification program to life that was conceptualized before I became a member of the league. And so now, as a leader of our membership organization, understanding that it's programs like this that really add value and make people want to be a part of our organization, this is extremely gratifying. So I just want to put that out there. I'm excited to see everyone here. My board story is that I've actually been serving on boards longer than anything else that I've done in my life. That includes being a lawyer, any other professional endeavors. I've had more time than I put in my education. I've been on boards. I served on boards at every academic institution that I attended, starting from high school, all the way in through grad school, med school, law school, undergrad, the whole 9. I've been to a lot of academic institutions, as you can hear. And it has become one of my favorite pastimes. And only because I said yes to one opportunity and then said yes to another and said yes to another. And then it became a thing. It became a skill set. And it's something that I have a separate career track for now, specifically in board service. And I'm pushing more and more, encroaching upon those for-profit seats and those paid seats. That's where I'm trying to get to one day, very soon, hopefully. But it's been great. And serving as a nonprofit board member has really opened the door for me on what it means to be a philanthropist. When we hear philanthropy, we always think about big bucks. You have to be rich to be a philanthropist. And that's just not true, right? If you have time and energy and ideas and sweat equity, as they say, you too can be a bona fide philanthropist. And so board service is sort of how I became a philanthropist before I had a 6-figure income. So, it's a pathway if you want to be a person who's known for giving back to your community in more ways than one. I know we have a series of questions, Jamie, so I won't go on and on and on, but I just want to give a little bit of a snippet about why I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you. And I think it's a really great point around the motivation. So tell us about what is your motivation for getting on when you're choosing these boards? How do you choose which one to join?
So oftentimes I was tapped and someone asked me, and that started the conversation. It's probably not until the last 5 or 6 years where I actually started to survey the market, if you will, and say, okay, I think I would like to be on the board for that organization or that organization. And I think once you reach a certain level of experience, or you're very clear on your value proposition as a board member, then you can sort of choose which boards certain subset, I guess, you can sort of choose. There are those super prestigious boards, if you will, where, they are, they're looking for Oprah to become a board member, something like that. So it might be a little bit more challenging. I'm going to make it there one day. But for most of your nonprofits, if you really know what you bring to the table, and especially if you hit those board lead markers that you mentioned, Jamie, those were awesome, fantastic. If you can hit those, they might bring you on as the chair of the board. I mean, in no time, you'll be leading the board, you'll be training other people. But so my way of selecting boards, or I should say saying no to an opportunity, is probably more likely the case. Someone may approach me, and then in the evaluation process, I say, I don't think this is the right fit for me. What are you looking for from me? And what do I have to give? And is it a match? It's really like a dating type of situation, right? Is this going to be mutually beneficial? And in that, beneficial in that I'm going to enjoy my time of service. It's going to be rich, gratifying for me. And I'm going to learn some things. And then on the other side, is my special sauce what you're looking for, right? Or is there a void on that board that I know I can step into and fill, and we can all be happy, and I can feel appreciated and appropriately utilized. The other thing I think about is the organization itself. What are you doing in the community? What do you represent? And are our brands aligned, right? Because at this point, approaching 40, I have a brand. And I don't want to be a part of a board of an organization, and then you're out here in the community doing things, or you're not treating your staff right, or there's some things that you're known for that don't align. So that might be a time when I actually say no to an organization. So
that's great. That's really helpful, especially to just say no, right? Because there's so many great organizations out there. And so think about when you're completely tapped on your schedule and you have to fit one more meeting in. Is this one that you're going to say, I want to do this no matter what? Or if you have to write that one more check for your giving, is it going to feel good to give that check? Those are great ways to filter opportunities. I'm curious also, what would you recommend to new people trying to get on boards that would help them stand out and be an attractive potential candidate?
Yeah. So I think knowing who you are, there's some soft skills, right? So, being on a board is largely about communication. So you need to really be comfortable communicating in rooms that are small, large, lots of people, not a lot of people, people who may be intimidating, potential donors. You really need to have a sense of confidence, I think, about yourself, that you can show up wherever you happen to be, because you are the governing body for this organization, right? You're the top fiduciary, you're the top leading group. And so when they really need to show off for a potential donor or a sponsor, sometimes they'll call in a board member. And so you want to be a person who can really represent for the organization, and you can communicate well. So you want to showcase that. Also, being a nice person is really underrated, but it's really, really important, because oftentimes boards that are highly effective, they have a a culture and they have a vibe, and they want someone who can add to, but they don't want someone who's going to come in and completely disrupt things and disrupt that team vibe that they have going. So you want to show that you're a team player, and however you show that, whether it's by examples in an interview, whether it's by references for people who work with you, whether it's just the energy that you bring to conversations with whoever you meet. You just kind of want to show that you have great people skills. Beyond that, your specific area of expertise, understanding what that is or what those are, it doesn't have to be just one thing, what those may be. Even if it's not an area of expertise, it may be a network. And so I say this to folks who are maybe in their very early 20s, who want to join boards, and say, you have a connection to a board pipeline. And a lot of times the folks who are open to board seats may be far more established in their career, but they may be a bit more disconnected from the 18, 19, 20, 22, 23 group, right? And so your value proposition is, I could potentially help to build a pipeline of new board members that are coming in, right? So you just have to kind of think about who you are as a package, and probably highlight what you feel is sort of the most valuable for the organization that's sitting in front of you. Of course, being honest and authentic, not making up anything, but you just want to kind of put forward what expertise you might have. The other things that I would say is, you want to highlight your connection to the mission, right? Jamie mentioned that we all have a lot on our plates, and oftentimes you're going to have to make the decision whether or not you're going to show up and be engaged, or where you're going to just have that "I'm just here so I don't get fined" energy, or whether you're just going to tap out for one of many justifiable reasons that you could say and not show up, right? And if you are very impassioned about the mission, chances are you're leaning more toward, I don't want to miss this meeting because I really have something I want to offer to this conversation, and I need to be present for this. I want to hear what so-and-so has to say, and yada, yada, yada. So you want to really highlight to the ED that you're meeting or other board members that you have a passion for what they care about.
Thanks, Courtney. That's great. Let's kick off some questions from y'all. And Ashley, you have one about normally interviewing. Oh, don't know. I lost my chat box with that change.
I can say it. Yeah,
That'd be great. Thanks.
Oh, no problem. It just popped into my head as Courtney was talking, is like, when you're the seeker and like you have a board that you're interested in joining and you haven't necessarily been tapped for it because maybe you just don't have a connection yet to that organization, who do you usually interview with or speak with? Is it like the board chair? Is it someone on the executive team?
Yeah, so I would say usually on the website, there would be some information about the board, and there may be a contact person for the board. That's where I would start. If not, you can always send a message to the executive director, and you can send a message if there's contact information for the board chair. Those are usually the touch points that I would suggest reaching out to and expressing interest, along with even sending a resume.
I would, yes, and that the other option when you don't especially when you're first in your career and wanting to connect, is start volunteering for the organization. When they see you showing up over and over again and they see you committing, you become very visible to that group, and that starts opening those doors as well. So I love that, depending on whichever level you're able to come at with the organization, showing your commitment and your enthusiasm for them. Really recognize you there.
Agreed.
Oh, Caitlin and I were thinking the same thing. That's right. Any other questions?
I don't have a question as much as just a comment that up until just actually pre-COVID, perfect timing, I worked on a local charity group fundraiser for a hospice. And I finally quit because nobody cared about making it better. And your comment about the mission and the values and the relentless drive for progress, and they simply didn't have it. And that was now not how I wanted to approach things. And several of us ended up leaving over it. They didn't care if it was better. We've done it before, nobody cares. And I found that just a really bad match. When you went through that, it really rang a bell to me. And sometimes you have to make a decision, as Courtney said, this isn't the right place for you anymore, and it's time to go. And it was really difficult. But what you said just hit home. It was just like, wow, there we are.
Yeah. You know, I really appreciate that, Melissa, because I've had to do that before with a board. It's hard. It is hard. And you know what, another approach that I have to boards now is when I decide to take on a board role, I decide for 3 years. That's it. 3 years. I give myself a limit, and what that does, it holds me accountable to the impact that I want to make in that period of time. I have to be strategic because I only have 3 years at the table. I come in, I start to cultivate a replacement if that's necessary, right? So that there can be a transition, and then I move on. So, and part of I think that came about was finding a frustration sometimes on a board role where it doesn't feel like the best match, but you don't want to give up because you made a commitment to be there, right? You want to carry through. I feel like if you can, in some ways, do the legwork up front to make sure it's a match on a high level, right? And even if it gets tough, stay clear to your objectives on what you wanted to deliver. If you're hitting your marks, right, then at least when it's time to transition, 3 years is not terribly long period of time, but you can hold off for your 3 years. And when you transition off, you do a self-accountability check. And if the organization still has room to grow, that's okay, right? You're not the person who's going to get them there in that particular point. But hopefully some of the other marks that you put for yourself, you hit those and you can walk away feeling satisfied, and you can take on another supportive role with the organization, be it a donor, be it another volunteer, be it someone else who shuttles someone else in who's a better fit. So I find that I found, you know what, we're just going to date for a few years. We're not going to get married, right? And in this few years, this is what we're going to do for each other. And then we're going to move along. And it keeps you fresh as well.
And Courtney, you have just nailed the other problem we had. They refused to put in board limits. And so getting new blood. And I think this all of what you've said today just triggers memories. That's very important.
Yeah.
Thanks, Courtney. I love that. And also to add, having your own accountability, holding yourself accountable, and then also introducing people who could fill your role is really valuable too. So who can you make introductions to as you're ready to leave is really helpful.
Yeah.
Avery, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask?
Yes, I asked in the chat about what we should be putting on our resumes, or what are boards looking for in terms of resumes? Do boards even want resumes? I mean, I'm a wedding florist, so none of my experience will be relevant. You know, I mean, like I own my own business, but in terms of like board and just like having related skills, I don't have like specific board kind of skills. So are there certain things I should have on my resume?
So I'm going to disagree with you right there. I'm going to push back hard, right? Because the first thing you said was you own your own business. So that's number one, right? A nonprofit is a business, and it's trying to operate and operate well. So if you know how to problem solve, you know how to be a critical thinker about challenges that you're facing as an entrepreneur, you know how to grow a thing over time, you know how to strategic plan, you know how to balance your books, you have a lot of skill for a board role because you are on a board. You're on a board for your company. And if you can show growth of your organization, right, from the time you founded it up until where it is now, then that's perfect. And you make a good point about resumes. Some folks don't want a resume. They just want to meet you and talk to you and get to know you. Others want to have a resume because they need to circulate it through the board. It's just a document that represents you before you actually show up in the room. But it's good to have it ready to go because it oftentimes will be requested of you. But I guess the big point I want to make is don't count yourself out because you don't have board experience, you probably have more of than what you actually realize. And if you think about a nonprofit as a business, as a company, you think about all the different aspects that's necessary to run a company, you'll probably find some matches. But really, if you can just highlight spaces and times in your professional career where you solve problems, where you made a strategic plan and you were able to think forward, right? Jamie made a comment about, and this is so super important, the distinction between the operations people and the board people, and the fact that the operations people are the day-to-day, but the board people are the long-term planners oftentimes, and also the policy people, the governance people. If you have roles in your professional life, or even in your semi-professional life, I should say, where you've had to be in leadership, generally speaking, that is a skill that's going to be transferable to a boardroom. It's just about being comfortable communicating and thinking in a way that's critical and asking the right questions. Jamie said it a few times. I'm going to say it a few more times. The best board members ask the most insightful questions. They ask questions upon questions upon questions. They give the results. I love this statement, Jamie. They give results and they expect results. They hold folks accountable 100%. If at the last meeting you made a statement about something, that good board member, when that next meeting, they're like, well, at the last meeting, you mentioned A, B, and C. So can you give us an update on that today, right? They are paying attention and they're very engaged. This was a question that you all sent to me to prep for, and I wanted to make sure I gave this little tidbit, and that's about what makes a really good board member. I had the honor and privilege to serve on the Howard University Incorporated Board of Trustees when I was a law student for a year. I was a full trustee. If you've heard anything about Howard recently, there's been some protesting, and in part it's because the board decided to remove those positions, and the alumni and students are in an uproar because those were such prestigious roles for us to be able to play. But I sat on the board with Debbie Allen, Vernon Jordan, some of the greats in our entertainment and business world. And Debbie Allen is one woman who was excellent. Another was this doctor whose name escapes me right now. But they were very, very different professionally, but they both were equally awesome. The physician had been a dean of a medical school. He was always thinking and very critical and looking at things from different directions, but he wasn't a challenge to get past. And I say that because sometimes the day-to-day people can present a plan and then the board can challenge it and make it so that we just put hurdles and hurdles and hurdles and hurdles and challenges instead of thinking about an issue, spotting problems, and then also helping to propose solutions and being team players to help move the ball forward. So in that case study about the art museum and the hotel in Vegas, you could have a ton of questions to poke holes in why this is a bad idea. But you could also have some solutions on how to make this palatable and resolve the issues that present, because the bottom line is that day-to-day team is trying to get the revenue and the organization needs the revenue. So good board members aren't just picking out problems. Good board members are also offering solutions to do what needs to be done for the business. On the other side, Debbie Allen is a performer. If you know Grey's Anatomy, she's Avery, the surgeon, Dr. Avery's mom, if you remember her. She's also a dancer. She's been on a lot of different things. Well, she offered her entertainment expertise. She hosted an event. She got a couple of her celebrity friends. They did a play at a place in DC and raised a lot of money. And so she's not a traditional board member, if you will. She may be at this point, but she's not a corporate professional in that regard, but she's an entertainer, and she brought all of that to the table, and she's fantastic. She also brought her personality and her energy. Sometimes these boards can be stale. They can be really dry, right? And you come in and feel like, I gotta be stale and dry too. No, you don't. You just because you are an animated person, I say this, Avery, because I know how wonderfully animated you can be. The reality is that brings energy and life to a boardroom, and people love it, right? Oftentimes. So I want you to also know that as you approach these spaces and the energy might not feel like, this is so serious. It doesn't mean that you have to be that you can be not take things seriously, but I'm just saying you can feel comfortable bringing your whole self to the table, because that diversity and energy can actually be very welcomed and can keep things spicy and lively and keep people engaged. So a bit of a run on, but I wanted to make sure I added those couple of little points in there, Jamie. Thanks for letting me do that.
That was awesome, Courtney. Thank you so much. I feel like it's not only just board seat related that we've been talking about, but also career related. I'm like taking notes. I'm like, ooh, this is great to keep in mind, even just as we think of our own careers too. So thanks everyone for your time tonight, and great participation and questions. Courtney, thank you for your time and for being here tonight, and for all that you've done to help kick off this program as well. Our next session is on Tuesday. We'll have Jamie back again. She's going to take us through the board's role in financial oversight. So excited to have her. And the other thing I wanted to mention is we will be developing an board seat certification assessment, which will be based off of the CSP training. So the 4 different trainings that we're having throughout this month. So passing this assessment will grant you the official certification as a Junior League of Boston board seat certification member. So more details to come. We'll be working with Courtney on kind of developing this assessment. And again, it will all be in the curriculum. You'll be getting these slides as well as the presentation link. So you can always refer back to it if you missed anything or want to hear it again before you are going into a boardroom. So with that, we are done with our first session. So thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. Congratulations, everyone. This is fantastic. Good night.
Bye.